Hello, world. Welcome to the Shannon Joy Show. Hello, world, and welcome to the Shannon Joy Show. We're broadcasting live from the Joy Virtual Studio right here in the beautiful Finger Lakes region of New York State. It is so great to be with all of you today. It's Wednesday, the epicenter of yet another very busy broadcast week. It is March 25th, and we're live on Rumble, live on Twitter, Spreely TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, every podcast platform you can imagine. Of course, we are so thrilled to see all of the Rumble chatters chatting. We also have chatters on Substack and Facebook and Twitter. If you have something to say, a question or a comment, make sure you put that up in the live chat on all of the platforms. Ina Zani Cyrus is producing the Shannon Joy Show today. She's going to keep an eye on all of the chats and bring some of the best comments and questions. We've got a lot to get to today. I'm so thrilled. I have been wanting to interview Nicholas Hulscher for almost a year. And the only thing holding me back was just the fact that I'm so busy, he's so busy, and remembering to make contact and getting the interview set up. I do that all myself. And it was just one of those things. I'm so glad we were finally able to connect. Nicholas Hulscher has been doing some amazing work in broad reporting on medical freedom in general, the legalities of medical freedom, the news about medical freedom, and then also mechanisms of harm relating to COVID-19 shots, sickness in America and abroad, but also healing as well. So he is one of the most researched voices out there. He has a great resume, very young guy. And of course, he's working with one of our faves, Dr. Peter McCullough and McCullough Foundation. And so we have a great interview with Nick Hulscher. He's going to be in about 10 minutes right here on the SJ Show. We're going to have about 40 minutes with Nicholas. Big headline today, massive ruling in terms of the case Missouri v. Biden. If you remember, Dr. Aaron Kheriaty has been on the Shannon Joy Show many times. He had a case against government censorship regarding medical freedom and speech about medicine and science. They had a great ruling. This is quote from Nicholas Hulscher. This is a historic win for free speech. And what we're looking at is a consent decree in Missouri v. Biden. It now bars the CDC, CISA, and the U.S. Surgeon General from coercing social media platforms to suppress protected speech for at least the next decade. So there's a little caveat there, which we'll ask Nicholas about. But nonetheless, this is a huge ruling. We also have a landmark bill, a piece of legislation coming out of Congress that we're going to ask Nicholas about, relating liability protection for pharmaceutical corporations. This is one that we are going to watch. We're also going to talk about some pretty nasty judge rulings ripping away the discussion point at the ACIP meeting about vaccine injury in general. We also have a judge ruling against some of the revisions to the childhood vaccine schedule that were put in place by Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s HHS. And another judge's ruling that is taking apart any protections being put in place for children, protecting them against gender-affirming care. So there's some good news and some bad news. We're going to look at all of that with Nicholas Hulscher. And also, even more importantly, what is making us sick today in the United States of America and abroad, and what is healing. We're going to go deep into ivermectin, fenbendazole, and membendazole, also hydroxychloroquine as mechanisms of healing for all sorts of reactions and adverse events, adverse effects from the COVID shots, and even in treating cancers, which is something that we all went into great detail over the weekend with with William Mackis in his amazing presentation at our Summit for Truth and Wellness. So we're going to be asking Nicholas about all of that in just about 7 minutes. After that interview, We have a very special interview I pre-recorded this week with a new guest on the Shannon Joy Show. His name is Dr. Alejandro Diaz, and very concerning news about a resurgence of tuberculosis in the United States of America and abroad. And much of it has to do with the degraded immune health as millions, billions of people took COVID shots. One of the greatest negative impacts of those shots have been a generally degraded immune system. This is now making people more vulnerable to some of the nastiest viruses out there. We're going to talk about that with Dr. Alejandro Diaz in a pre-recorded interview. And so we have a lot to get to today on the SJ Show. But of course, we want to thank our sponsors. Then I'm going to say hello to all of you on the live chats. And then we're going to bring Nicholas in. Peter Schiff, amazing sponsor of the SJ Show. Show note for this week. No guest tomorrow. It's just you and me. And we're going to go over all the amazing guests that we had on this week. On Friday, we are going to do a live show. I will be self-producing my show at the regular time, 12:30 or 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Eastern time this Friday. And I'm going to be welcoming in Peter Schiff. There is a lot happening in the financial world, investing, gold and silver. This is what Peter put out yesterday. We're not going here today because we're focusing on health, but we're going to do a full hour, maybe longer, with Peter on Friday. So do not miss that show. Mark your calendars. He's going to be with us live. He pushed this out just a few hours ago. We are headed for a full-blown financial crisis. February import prices spiked at 1.3%, while export prices surged to 1.5%, annualizing to inflation rates of 16.8% to 19.6%. That's before oil rose 50%. Unless the Fed raises rates, which they won't, several hundred basis points now, inflation will skyrocket, says Peter Schiff. He goes on. As inflation skyrockets, this will now cause home ownership costs to soar, including mortgage rates, insurance, utilities, maintenance, and taxes. Real estate prices will crash, and the recent collapse in mortgage and refi applications is just the tip of the iceberg. What lies beneath is a crisis worse than 2008. This is going to implicate and impact every one of you watching today and everyone that is watching on Friday. Peter Schiff has been correct in his analysis over the past 20 years. He has been stalwart in his conviction, very consistent. It's why he's a sponsor of the Shannon Joy Show and why we have him on as a regular guest. As you know, we have only the best guests and experts on the SJ Show. He will be with us live on Friday for a very important report on this. And we're going to be talking about how you can protect yourself. It's going to be bad. It's never as bad as I think it's going to be, but it is going to be bad. There's a lot of doomsday predictions out there. The zombie apocalypse. It's the end of the world as we know it. And as you know, I'm a keep your head on straight, right? Keep calm and carry on kind of gal. We don't panic here at the SJ Show, but we do acknowledge when tough times are coming. And the best thing that we can do is to prepare. And we're going to do that today with Nick Hulscher in our discussion. You need to prepare to protect your own health, and you also need to prepare to protect yourself financially. So Peter is going to be with us on Friday, noon till 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. I will be self-producing, so it's going to be super fun. By the way, if you have not put together a gold and silver strategy or a metal strategy, you need to consider doing that today. That means going to shiftgold.com/joy. That is shiftgold.com/joy right now, today. The Shift team has every possible way that you can use metals to hedge against the coming chaos, whether it's physical gold and silver in your safety deposit box or in a safe in your home. They have the easiest way to purchase gold and silver right on the website. If you want to back up your retirement or protect your retirement with a gold and silver IRA, they have those options as well. Very convenient toll-free number listed right on my website. The team is amazing. I've worked with many of them. I purchased my gold from Peter Schiff. I have a metals-backed IRA with the Shift team. And they also have T Gold, tokenized gold, which we're going to talk about on Friday. I think this is going to be very important for regular people moving into gold and silver and actually beginning to use gold and silver as a currency. I continue to be, and Peter continues to be bullish on metals despite everything we've seen over the past couple weeks. The fundamentals have not changed. And until those fundamentals change, we are going to continue to see, I believe, an increased valuation. So make sure you go to shiftgold.com/joy today. That is shiftgold.com/joy. You'll get hooked up with Peter's team and begin the process of protecting yourself financially. Thank you to all of our sponsors, The Wellness Company, Satellite Phone Store, and of course, Shift Gold, and PCM and Associates, Dom Polano. So without further ado, I want to bring in our very special guest, Nicholas Hulscher. I have been wanting to interview you for such a long time. I think that it's unbelievable it's taken so long for us to become connected. You are doing such important work at such a young age. I'm so impressed by you in so many ways. Welcome to the Shannon Joy Show for the first time. I am absolutely sure that it will not be the last time. How are you doing today?
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be on your show. I'm a big fan.
Oh gosh, Nicholas, let me just give everyone your bio first, and then we're going to start big picture, and then we're going to whittle everything down in this very important conversation. Nicholas Hulscher is an epidemiologist and a McCullough Foundation Fellow. So he graduated from the University of Michigan School of Public Health, where he earned his master's in public health. It's an MPH. It's a degree with a specialization in epidemiology in April of 2024. He then, after graduating, linked up with one of our favorites, Dr. Peter McCullough, working with him and the McCullough Foundation as a researcher and a publisher of some of the most important scientific and medical research in the world. And he has already contributed in so many ways. He's been the lead author in multiple papers. One is autopsy findings in cases of fatal COVID-19 vaccine-induced myocarditis, and a systematic review of autopsy findings in deaths after COVID-19 vaccination. Very important in terms of mechanisms of harm, among others. And he's just done phenomenal work. Nicholas, how did you get hooked up? You have a great story about how you got hooked up with the McCullough Foundation and Dr. Peter McCullough to begin with. You actually displayed courage at a very young age. People were telling you you're going to lose your career. You would never work in this industry if you took this path into medical truth and actually publishing good research and scrutinizing the bad research. Why don't we start with your story there? Because I want the audience to get to know you and how you got started into all of this.
Yeah, it all began at the University of Michigan. Well, actually, before I went to University of Michigan for a Master of Public Health and Epidemiology, I was already aware that something was very wrong with the public health system and vaccinations. In fact, in 8th grade, I wrote a paper on the link between vaccines and autism. So, so I've always had large suspicions. And then obviously 2020 hit, and I was like, all right, something's wrong. This is pre-planned, and it was an absolute travesty. So I wanted to make an actual difference, and so I graduated from my undergrad university, Oakland University, and then I went straight into epidemiology at University of Michigan. And so at that school, I needed an internship. And so I emailed every single professor, like probably 50 of them. Okay. None of them, half of them didn't respond, and the other half said no. One said yes, but it took about a month. So while I was waiting for a yes, I said, you know what, screw it. I'm going to email Dr. McCullough. I was a huge fan of his, and I thought maybe he would have some research I could do. And he did. He responded in 5 minutes with an internship idea.
Oh my gosh.
That was a systematic review of autopsy findings and deaths after COVID-19 vaccination. So I was doing that research, looking at the deaths after the shots, at the center of University of Michigan, and I was warned by professors, behind closed doors, I would have no career if I continued to do that research with Dr. McCullough, but I proceeded anyways, and I'm very glad I did. In fact, if I listened to them, I'm pretty sure I would actually have no career.
Wow, that's amazing. Such wisdom at such a young age. You must have great parents. I mean, how did you? I mean, eighth grade, that's amazing. You must have had some type of environment of freedom of thought and good old-fashioned common sense, surrounding you to be so aware at such a young age.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I definitely did have, or still do have, great parents for sure. And yeah, they played a big role in kind of helping me navigate to the path that I've been on now. So, I'm very thankful for them. And but yeah, I was always kind of scavenging the internet, as a kid, high school, and
Yeah.
an undergrad on the, so-called conspiracy sites.
Hmm.
Some of you may remember, these weird forums, like one's called like Godlike Productions. That's all
Okay.
we had back then.
Right.
And so we went on I would go on those forums and kind of read things that, were not being reported by any mainstream media organization. So I began to realize that something was very wrong
Right.
in the world.
Right. Well, one of the most consistent themes of 2020 and beyond is that the conspiracy theory very quickly becomes the conspiracy fact. And
Exactly.
it has accelerated over the past few years. We have a lot to get to today, Nicholas. I'd like to start with some of the legal battles that are being fought and some of the recent developments, judges ruling on certain cases that are kind of ripping away the very meager wins that we have achieved at HHS, which does not surprise me. But let's start with the good news. You reported, and this is linked in the show notes of the Shannon Joy Show today, on a major victory for against censorship and for medical freedom and truth out of the Missouri v. Biden case. What are your thoughts on that? If you could give us the nuts and bolts on that ruling and what it means for freedom of speech, but also freedom of speech regarding public health in particular.
Yes, yes. This recent ruling on the Missouri versus Biden landmark case is a big win. It's actually a huge win. We haven't gotten many wins in recent weeks, months, and years,
That's
but
right.
this is a win. This is a win. So basically, this case was brought forth because it was confirmed and later confirmed through discovery that the Biden administration, along with the CDC and a few other federal agencies, the U.S. Surgeon General's office, they have actually, threatened, coerced, etc. Social media companies, X, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Meta, they coerce them to censor free speech, particularly during COVID and for the COVID vaccines, alternative treatments. The federal agencies literally went in and said, listen, you guys got to take it down, or, we're going to cut off funding, we're going to do all sorts of bad things. So this case now reached this end stage. It took a few years.
Wow.
And so the final ruling is that now the federal government, CDC, Surgeon General, they are banned for at least 10 years to restrict or threaten social media companies to censor free speech. So, now if another, pandemic comes or another dangerous shot gets rolled out, the government will not be allowed to coerce these companies to censor us anymore. So it's a big win.
That's extraordinary news. And interestingly enough, I see you, Mr. Worthless Eater, on the live chat on Rumble. And his question, Nicholas, is Shannon, no YouTube today. Usually we live stream on every platform, and we typically live stream on YouTube every day, but we don't live stream on YouTube when we are discussing public health or vaccines or turbo cancers or any of those topics because we will get hit with censorship. They'll take down the show and they'll ban me for 2 weeks. So, despite the door opening in some areas over at YouTube, they still are censoring. I wonder, Nicholas, if this ruling could potentially impact that area of censorship.
We hope it does. We hope it does because you're right. YouTube is still very hostile towards people giving alternative viewpoints,
Right.
particularly when it comes to vaccines. And so, that's still very worrisome. But hopefully, now this case with this ruling, maybe they will start to completely reverse course on that and realize that, now they're in the minority and, it's absolutely ridiculous to still be censoring at this point in time, and honestly, the other social media companies do appear to still exert forms of censorship on,
Right.
again, people raising concerns about vaccines, while not obvious censorship, but algorithmic censorship, where they basically will just suppress your posts and not let it reach a wide audience.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. That's great news. In other news, and by the way, Nicholas writes and reports under Focal Points as part of the McCullough Foundation, and he also is on Twitter as well. So please follow him on Substack and follow him on Twitter to support all of his efforts. We'll get those handles up for you in just a moment. You recently reported another I'm very, very interested in following this case, a new piece of legislation that seeks to remove the liability protection from vaccine manufacturers and pharmaceutical corporations. That was released, I think, just a few weeks ago. Can you explain the nature of that bill and how important that will be to beginning to establish here in this country a new era of medical freedom, basic medical freedom? It comes with holding corporations responsible for the damages they cause when they inject humans. And until that is situated and addressed, it's going to be very difficult to continue to go for medical freedom because the billions will continue to roll into these pharma companies and they can continue the censorship and the coercion and the lies and the deceit and all of the things. So this liability protection is absolutely critical and it's built in the infrastructure of our laws, our federal laws. Nicholas, can you explain what this bill seeks to do and what we can do to help push its cause?
Yes, yes, this bill is absolutely massive. But we have to remember, we have two bills now. Two recent bills were introduced that both target different aspects of vaccine liability, and they both need to pass to actually protect public health because our children have not been getting protected by these vaccine makers. So the first one
Amazing.
is by Senator Rand Paul. It's the End the Vaccine Carve-Out Act. I believe Representative Gosar is involved in that as
Okay.
well as many other people. And what this bill would do is it would end the childhood vaccine liability shield through the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, where that act gave these vaccine makers full liability protection for injuries that shots like the MMR vaccine and all the other vaccines cause, the pneumococcal shots and all these shots, if they injure a child, if they give them brain damage, autism, if they give them a Guillain-Barré syndrome or seizures, they don't face any penalties, and so they don't have to roll out properly tested products currently. And that's why since 1986, since they passed this act, we went from about, like 12 doses now up to 72 doses by age 18
That's
because
right.
they don't face any liability. So this bill by Senator Rand Paul would strip that away. They would be forced to finally test their vaccines because right now, not one of the childhood vaccines currently recommended by the CDC was licensed based on a double-blind placebo-controlled trial. Not one. They
Outrageous.
tested against another vaccine that also wasn't placebo-tested. So it's all
Outrageous.
untested garbage. This has to pass. But then the second bill is absolutely huge for the COVID shots. The second bill is called the Liable Act, introduced by Representative Chip Roy. The Liable Act, Let Injured Americans Be Legally Empowered, which is a very fitting name, would strip away PrEP Act liability
Let's
protections.
go.
Yes,
Let's
with
go. Go ahead.
emergency countermeasures. It would
Okay.
strip that away. And so basically, what that means is these mRNA injections, how they've injured millions of people, disabled millions, and killed hundreds and hundreds of thousands in America alone. All those injured people would then be able to sue Pfizer and Moderna. They would
Wow.
go bankrupt. There's no way they would be able to handle the tidal wave of lawsuits with that PrEP Act liability shield stripped away.
Wow.
So both of these bills have to pass.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, the Liable Act introduced by Chip Roy, Tom Massey has signed on, I believe, as a co-sponsor, and also Ro Khanna. Am I incorrect in that? Is Ro Khanna involved in one of these bills as a
I'm not
co-sponsor or
sure.
supporter? Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay. I need to look into that because I did see something. There was a report somewhere, and I remember my eyebrows went up because Ro Khanna was in support, and it might have been the Liable Act. And if you guys, Annie, if you could maybe check on that quickly in production and see if that's the case. And the point being, we often get people who are like, that's never going to happen, or it's never going to pass, or Democrats are never going to get on it. Ro Khanna is a Democrat from California, and he has worked very closely on certain pieces of legislation with Tom Massey, particularly the legislation to release the Epstein files. They've been a very powerful bipartisan duo in terms of Epstein justice. And so I would love to see, I hope there are conversations happening with Ro Khanna and a certain segment of the Democrat Party, because if they could do it with the Epstein files, you could really begin to see an opportunity for pieces of legislation that are very basic common sense. All right. This is holding corporations, pharmaceutical corporations, liable for damages when their products maim and kill. That is such a basic concept, Nicholas, right? It's so basic. And I think a lot of people could get behind this.
Yes, it's very basic. We need bipartisan
Yeah.
support for this. There's no reason why people should not support protecting innocent people from large corporations that operate like criminal enterprises, right? There should be full bipartisan support. Anybody who doesn't support these bills is clearly either captured or receiving money from these enterprises.
Right. Right. Well, so there's the good news. There is good news out there. Anything that you've seen, Nicholas, in terms of uptake of childhood vaccines, adult vaccines, COVID shots in general? Because that's always one of the areas where I find great hope, even if things are moving slowly. I love seeing the polling. I love seeing the surveys coming out of Americans saying, 80 to 90% of them are not getting COVID shots anymore. You're the numbers guys, you're the research guy. What have you seen that gives you hope about the culture in general? People, normies, people who are not embedded in all this research, but are kind of getting snippets of it and changing their perceptions and their habits as a result. Are you seeing anything that gives you hope there?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of hope. In fact, we are the majority now. We are the
Okay.
majority, yes. A recent Rasmussen survey came out a few months ago. This is representative of American voters. It is credible. And they found 56% of Americans now believe that the COVID shots have resulted in mass deaths, in significant
Wow.
number of deaths. And so
Wow.
yeah, and then we also see the vaccine uptake is tanking. At least with the COVID shots, it has tanked. Years ago, it stays at about 15 to 20% of the population is still under mass
Amazing.
psychosis. But it'll be difficult to get them out of that as they
Yeah.
destroy their health.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But yeah, it's the tide is turning. The tide really is turning. Now we need to see, this legislation passed to have, actionable things happen. As recently, unfortunately, that rogue judge that basically reversed all progress of the past year.
Yeah. No, very good. Very good stuff. Let's get to the bad news now, because there's bad news too. So recently, we've had a couple judges. We've had very, very meager success within HHS, unfortunately. Robert Malone actually just stepped down. It was announced that Dr. Robert Malone has stepped down from his position at ACIP. And, the COVID shots are still in the market. The vaccine injured are still being ignored and gaslit. The childhood vaccine schedule was reduced from 90 shots to like 78 shots, which was not good enough to begin with, but a judge just ripped that away, ruling against somehow the ability to change the recommendations for the childhood schedule. ACIP was set to conduct the very first of its kind, a Q&A or a meeting or a forum that was addressing the vaccine injured, humans who have been debilitated by childhood vaccines, adult vaccines, COVID vaccines in general. They were to open up that discussion through ACIP that was supposed to happen this week or next week. And apparently somehow a judge gets to say they can't have a meeting. I don't really know how that works, but that was another ruling. And then a third ruling by a judge. And, as a political analyst who has done this for 12 years with the Republicans, big, big promises, meager, meager results, and then the meager results get ripped away by judges. Rinse and repeat. So this is not new to me. In fact, I think the Republicans, at least in the presidency, are glad about this because it allows them to continue on with their agendas and then blame the judges for ripping them away. But that's just my political analysis on this. But even in the area of protecting children from gender affirming care, which is barbaric and horrifying, even that was ripped away again by a judge. Those three in context, Nicholas, what are your thoughts on those rulings? And have I articulated them properly, or am I missing something here?
No, you have articulated that perfectly. Recent weeks, basically, MAHA, the new HHS administration, has been destroyed. All progress of the past year has literally been reversed by these radical judges that literally, they don't have any public health expertise. They're not scientists or physicians, but yet they acted like they could just change everything back to how it was. And so we'll go through the first ruling was by Judge Brian Murphy. What he did was he ruled on a lawsuit filed by the American Academy of Pediatrics, which wanted to stop all of the changes to the vaccine schedules. And the judge ruled in favor of AAP, despite the fact that AAP is facing a federal RICO lawsuit for running a decades-long racketeering operation for vaccine safety fraud.
Wow. Would you mind? Would you mind just? I mean, tell me about that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so Children's Health Defense's legal team did file a federal racketeering influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act RICO lawsuit against the American Academy of Pediatrics because for the past many decades, all of the recommendations they've issued that they've issued to doctors and other organizations and even federal recommendations, they haven't been based on actual safety data. We have to remember they started to recommend 72 doses by age 18. There's not one study testing these in full combination, none looking at long-term neurodevelopmental outcomes of chronic disease. And yet they said that it was completely safe anyway. So they were just lying,
Wow.
pulling things out of thin air, while at the same time, this is key, receiving money from the vaccine makers themselves to issue these recommendations.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
so you can't
Wow.
make this up. You can't make this up.
Now, where is that case? What stage is that case in, and in which court? Do you know offhand? I know it's a lot.
I don't know. I don't know exactly the court
Okay.
offhand. I do
Okay.
know it was filed about a month or so ago.
Okay.
So, it has not progressed as far as I'm aware yet. But we hope it ends up reaching a discovery phase where, we can see what this
Yeah.
enterprise has been up to. in recent decades.
They don't want us getting to Discovery, Nicholas. That would be a very,
No.
very bad thing, I think, for them. Sorry, I cut you off on the judges. So continue on with the judges ripping away some of the meager gains that we'd made through HHS. I was just interested in that RICO case because I'm going to be watching that one now for sure.
Yes, yes. So HHS in the past year has done, multiple things, and the ACIP committee. So what they did was they shrunk the recommended childhood vaccine schedule from about 80 doses to age 18 down to over 30 doses by age
Okay.
18. And
Better than
so
I thought.
they reduced the number of vaccine types from 17 down to 11.
Okay.
Just universal recommendation. So they did that, and then ACIP, since last summer, they have, and obviously RFK fired all the old ACIP members because they were captured by
Mhm.
pharmaceutical interests, and replaced them with a new panel. And this new panel did stop universal recommendations for newborn infants getting hepatitis B shots, and as well as a few other things. And so all of that happened. And then this federal judge, Brian Murphy, comes in and strikes it all down. He
Hmm.
reversed the vaccine schedule back to 72 doses
Jeez.
by age 18. Yeah.
One guy.
He, yeah, one guy.
One guy just decides. That's crazy.
He did that, and then he also disbanded the ACIP committee, and so now it's been thrown into chaos, and it's non-functional now. They can't even meet, and reversed all of the votes that they held in the past year. So that means hepatitis B shot recommendations for literal newborn infants, that's now back on the table thanks to this
Unbelievable.
judge. So we're now in a very bad situation. I haven't seen any, talk or press conference of this from HHS. All we've actually seen was, a statement by, some spokesperson at HHS. But, it seems like we're just taking it. It seems like they're just taking it and not
They
doing anything. There's
they
been, yeah,
They are,
it's
Nicholas. They are. And I won't speak for you, I'll speak for myself. This was one of the reasons that we advocated that Bobby Kennedy Jr., as the head of HHS, not go through ACIP in order to get some of these things done. A lot of this could be done just through his leadership, especially in terms of the COVID shots, ending the declaration of emergency, right? Which turned all of this into a military operation and determined that vaccines were countermeasures. Another reason that people were not able to get any type of justice for their injuries. So this was something that we were very, very loudly advocating against. Of course, this was, fell on deaf ears. Myself, Dr. Mary Talley Bowden, Sasha Latipova, Dr. Naomi Wolf. I mean, all of us. In fact, I believe we formed petitions. We wrote open letters. We did all the things. We went to mainstream news media, and it was exactly for this reason. Because when you narrow it into this one committee that shouldn't be in charge of anything anyway, then you get into the system and you can have a judge pull it away. Bobby Kennedy Jr. has not said anything about this, and I have been told by people very close who have had conversations with him that it's over. Basically, that think it's over. That we're going to have to come from the outside in. There will be no movement from HHS whatsoever on any of the agendas of MAHA or the medical freedom movement, that it is now everything and anything from outside. And so I'm sorry that we've wasted a year and a half on this. I really am. We didn't have to waste a year and a half on this, putting all of our eggs in the HHS basket, which is really frustrating. It's interesting that the wins that we're talking about are coming largely from outside of Washington, D.C., except for maybe that legislation. But I don't want to put you on the spot there, Nicholas, because you're not, you don't advocate politically. But I will just say, in terms of my analysis, this is why I always say, do not go into the belly of the beast. We need to be advocating from the outside in. Parallel institutions, refusal to comply, everything but the kitchen sink, state pieces of legislation, local legislation, lawsuits, every type of lawsuits, whether it's international or at the county level or at the state level. But we spent way too much time, in my opinion, begging and hoping and praying that Bobby's going to save us. And I think that was a mistake of the movement. And I think it's coming to fruition now as we see what these judges are doing. So that's just my thought on that. You can comment if you want, but you don't have to.
Well, honestly, you're 100% accurate. That's exactly, what's happening at this point in time. We put too much faith into one man. We thought things were going to drastically change. And now here we are a year later, and we're back to where we were.
Right.
And so, it's very disappointing. They're not even talking about vaccines anymore. They've been instructed not to by, probably some individuals in the executive branch. And now they're just talking about food. And, we have to remember, obviously, yeah, food's important, but so is the 6 million, infants, 6-month-olds and children getting gene transfer injections.
Yeah.
Right. They don't talk about that. And so, yeah, I'm very, very disappointed. And
Yes.
and one more thing, it's not just vaccines. We have to remember a month ago that executive order ramping up glyphosate production and giving the manufacturers liability protection. It's just ridiculous.
Right. Right. Not only are they not removing liability protection from the pharmaceutical companies, they are expanding it to the chemical companies and the tech companies and the AI companies, which is insane. It's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. But the good news is in the culture. And that's really what I'm hearing. Like, we might not be getting the wins in Washington, D.C., but we are getting the wins outside of Washington, D.C. And I think those wins are going to be the ones that are the most meaningful. And those wins are going to be coming, Nicholas, from Nicholas, organizations like the McCullough Foundation and your publication. You guys are doing groundbreaking research. I can't even keep up with the papers and the studies and all of the work that you guys are doing that is underscoring so many of the horror stories that we saw in the rollout of the COVID shots to begin with, and what parents have seen in terms of the childhood schedule for their kids. So I want to go through some of the work that you have done in the papers of most importance, because there are a lot. Can you look at, the year or two, the 2 years that you have been in this situation or in this position with the McCullough Foundation conducting research? Can you point to some of the most important studies and findings that you think are going to really underscore and support real movement in the culture and legally that you've looked at? Because I think that I'd like to give you free reign there to kind of tell us what you think is most important, what you think is going to be most meaningful for people in terms of medical freedom and also protecting their bodies.
Yes, there's so many,
Right.
many, studies we could pick to go through that are absolutely, earth-shattering, to say the least, that never gets any mainstream coverage, even though it should.
Right.
And I guess, we could start with the COVID shots, child shots, or, we can go into cancer. We're now doing some cancer research. What do you want to start with?
Let's focus on cancer because we are just a couple days out of my 4th annual Summit for Truth and Wellness. And we welcomed I keep saying doctor, I shouldn't. We welcomed William Mackis. He's almost going to be a doctor. He has his medical license approved in the state of Florida. He is exiled. He's in the US, evading the Canadian health officials who want to put him in prison for 2 years. But William he presented for an hour and a half on, the case studies, the work that he's doing, thousands of patients, just absolutely astounding in terms of cancer. One of the worst adverse impacts of the COVID shots has been what we now know as turbo cancer. So not only did they suppress the use of ivermectin to treat COVID, they, push people into the COVID shots, which then, in terms of mechanisms of harm, you can maybe speak to that, accelerated cancers. And there's research on that you have uncovered. But they are now also trying to suppress the use of ivermectin, menbendazole, and other generic drugs in the treatments, despite what we're now seeing, case studies and even new reports coming out. So let's focus on cancers. Let's narrow in there. I'll have you on again. We'll do the COVID shots and other mechanisms of harm, and also the childhood schedule on another date. I think that cancer is a really great place for us to narrow in here because of the recent summit. So why don't you go? Why don't we start with what you have found in terms of the COVID shots and cancers, particularly turbo cancers?
Yes, so I mean, the evidence is now undeniable. There's actually over 100 peer-reviewed studies now that indicate the mRNA injections can induce cancer via 17 distinct mechanisms. In
Wow.
fact, CDC data now indicates CDC death record mortality data from the CDC Wonder database indicates the COVID-19 vaccination program is one of the largest carcinogenic exposures in history. And so that's how serious this is. There's been about 136,000 excess cancer deaths in the US since the vaccines rolled out in 2021. So it's accelerating the cancers, increasing mortality from cancer. But also, there's been two population studies with 8.7 million people combined in them. And both of them combined found that the COVID shots increased the risk of 7 major cancers, ranging from bladder, breast, and colorectal to stomach cancer and thyroid cancer. And these were vaccinated versus unvaccinated. And so the vaccinated are suffering way higher rates of cancers. And then we have the
Wow.
mechanistic evidence that we have published at the McCullough Foundation. We have identified an instance of genomic integration of mRNA vaccine genetic material in a
Mm.
stage 4 bladder cancer patient. We found a segment of the DNA plasmid spike expression cassette fused into her chromosome 19 in her tumor DNA.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so, yeah, we believe that's a mechanism. This DNA contamination is getting in to the genome, insertional mutagenesis, causing widespread havoc and uncontrolled cell growth. And then we have another paper where we identified that the COVID shots turn off tumor suppressor genes, P53 and BRCA, and thousands of other
Wow.
genes. So the
Wow.
gene expressions become completely thrown into chaos after these shots. We compared vaccine injured people to a healthy control group pre COVID, and literally genes related to mitochondrial function, immune function, and cancer surveillance were thrown into chaos.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
it's affecting all sorts of things. And then we could keep going down the mechanisms of how they induce cancer. Another one is hyperinflammation.
Yep.
Cancers love to grow in inflammatory environments, as
Yep.
well as, there's just so many things. And, we can't even really keep track of it. But for sure, we know that these shots are indeed carcinogenic.
Have you found anything in terms of the number of shots versus the instances of cancers or turbo cancers? And also, what percentage, or is there any information on what percentage of people who had COVID shots actually, experienced these type of cancers? Is it 10%, 20%, 50%? I mean, any information or research there in terms of those percentages?
We don't know exactly the percentage of individuals who are vaccinated that will develop cancer, but we have, risk estimates of how much your, odds will increase of developing cancer ranges from about 20% to 60%,
Mm,
and it increases your risk of overall cancer hospitalization by about 25%.
hmm.
And that was based on those two studies with 8 million people. So it does increase the risk there, but there is a study, and this is particularly important, is it doesn't just appear to induce cancers, but actually accelerate them.
Oh
And
my
so a
Lord.
study looked in pancreatic cancer patients and stage 4 pancreatic cancer patients, and it literally cut the time left to live in half.
Oh
So
my word.
it cut their survival time in half, and it doubled their death risk. So it's making the cancers worse. That's why we see higher cancer mortality.
Mm. Hence the term turbo cancer, which is now a reality in the US, and it's absolutely tragic. And it's because of the shots, the COVID shots. So interesting, Nicholas, that the people who coerced and forced these shots onto an unsuspecting public poisoned them. The people who did that are the same people who are now desperately trying to suppress any discussion of cures, because the good news, this is terrible news that you have just presented here on the show, horrible news. But the very, very good news is that there are very effective, it appears, low cost ways to treat cancers alongside of typical cancer treatments in the use of substances like ivermectin, fembendazole, mebendazole, hydroxychloroquine, and other more natural protocols. And a lot of this work is being done, like the actual in the field work of creating the protocols and deploying them through people like William Mackis. On your end, Nicholas, I'm seeing all of the research, like research pouring in on these types of treatments. Can you overview these treatments and then also speak to the persecution and the attempt to suppress this in the US in the same way they tried to suppress the use of ivermectin to treat COVID? They are now trying to suppress the use of ivermectin, among others, to treat cancers. And it's disgusting in my mind. Your thoughts?
Yes, yes. So first, it's important to remember the Soviet scientists discovered that antiparasitics had anti-cancer effects in the 1950s, and that was literally classified by the CIA for about 50 years, and then they declassified it in 2011. So we were set back, half a century of research on these compounds. We would have been much further along at this point
Wow.
if they hadn't
Wow.
chose to bury that information. But regardless, independent scientists have advanced it, particularly recently, not only now in humans, but in the preclinical studies. So in the preclinical studies, ivermectin, mebendazole, and fenbendazole do exert about or over 12 anti-cancer mechanisms, including targeting cancer stem cells, as
Yes.
well as interfering with cancer cell signaling, disrupting what's called microtubules
Yep.
in these developing cancer cells. And so when they expose these antiparasitics to cancers in the test tube, it stops the growth and it shrinks them. But then you move on to animals, and it does the same thing in animals. They test these compounds and it halts the tumor growth in many
Hmm.
cancer types. In fact, over 12 cancer types it has shown effects on. And then, yeah, we get to the human evidence. There's been very sparse human evidence so far. There has been a few trials, very small trials, that have reported improvements. And then there has been, yeah, Dr. William Mackis did publish that case series of 3 stage 4 cancer patients that went into either near remission or complete remission after taking the fembendazole protocol. Now, this is very big. We are currently working on a paper looking at human cancer outcomes in
Mm.
those who took ivermectin and mebendazole. And the preliminary results are absolutely shocking. And we hope to get this out within the next week or so.
Oh my
This would,
gosh.
finally give us some human data.
Yeah.
And I want people to know, also on this paper is the chair of the president's cancer panel, Dr. Harvey Risch. So, it's a very serious paper.
Wow.
And I think it's going to change things quite drastically in this realm. I'll just say, many patients did report that their cancers disappeared. So, stay tuned for that. And yeah, it's a very, very big thing. We got to start, finding ways to stop these cancers as now more and more people are becoming diagnosed with them, particularly at young ages.
It really is astonishing. And to meet so many of the cancer patients and people suffering from cancer at the summit, Nicholas, there were people who flew in from all over the country to meet William and to thank him. Cancers in remission, cancers, tumors shrinking, the diligence that he practiced in terms of really documenting these case studies and then publishing it on his Substack, right? I mean, these are clients who have agreed for him to, publish the results, their emails and the protocols that were deployed. And, one of the things he did say was that it's still short term, right? We need to see if if this is happening in year 1 and year 2, we need to see what's happening in 3, 5, 10, 15. So there's always a caution there. But this 12 anti-cancer mechanisms, and it's very exciting to see this go mainstream. And I believe it is going mainstream. I think that this is going to change so much, and it's why they're fighting so viciously against any progress here, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, they're fighting viciously against this. It's what's called the chemo cartel.
Oh
They
yeah.
don't want any other alternative treatments as they rake in the cash of, deploying treatments with very low uh, clinical benefit rates that are not helping. In fact, only, perhaps in some cases, not only shortening survival, but if it does improve it by maybe a month or two, as their entire body shuts down from the cytotoxic agents.
Mm.
So yeah, and then it's like thousands upon thousands of dollars per treatment. They got to come in very frequently and pay that cash for that treatment. And so, they don't want to get away from that for something that is cheap, extremely cheap and
Yes.
unpatentable. And so, yeah, it's very, very important that we start to identify these alternative things. But one last thing, ivermectin, mambendazole, these compounds are very safe in humans.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you take too much, it's toxic, but it appears to be safer than even Tylenol. I mean, so it's
Wow.
not like you're taking, heavy drugs that are going to result in acute toxicity at standard doses. No, it's been shown to be very safe.
Well, and this also threatens the new deployment of mRNA technologies and cancer vaccines, right? Like, this is where all of these bastards are moving, right? They inject us, poison us, and then sell us the cure, which is also toxic, and rinse and repeat. But there are how many, in development mRNA, cancer vaccines that they would like to deploy to fix the crisis that they created. So, in terms of your what you said about the typical cancer, I mean, chemo, radiation, William spent some time discussing another mechanism of some of these combinations of generic drugs in terms of helping the body deal with and heal from the destructive nature of chemotherapy and radiation. In his observational study, there were many who fared much, much better with that traditional cancer treatment while also using a combination of the ivermectin, fenbendazole, mebendazole, and they didn't have the horrible side effects that you see consistently with some of those treatments. Have you seen anything in the research from your perspective on that?
Yeah, I've seen one very promising thing that people take, and it's actually had human randomized trials already, is actually high dose vitamin C. A recent
Wow.
randomized trial found in stage 4, I believe, pancreatic cancer patients. Though they were both groups were taking chemo. One group only had chemo, the other group had chemo and IV vitamin C, about 75 grams a few times a week. The group that received the vitamin C had literally lived twice as long. So they had
Wow.
doubled survival time. They had
Wow.
less side effects from the chemo, and they had better outcomes, right? So
Amazing.
yeah, so that's a very big one for sure that appears to be able to counteract those toxic side effects of chemo while at the same time exerting its own anti-cancer mechanisms.
Amazing. Amazing. We do not have, we've just about run out of time, Nicholas, and I'm really bummed about that because I really could talk to you for another hour or 2 hours. And I would like to actually do this again in a couple weeks. If you have the time to do it, I'd like you to come in regularly. I want to talk about the childhood schedule. I want to talk about the COVID shots and other mechanisms of harm and cures because this is part of the parallel institution. This is part of us winning from the outside in, like getting this information out to the culture as much as we possibly can. So we have a few minutes left. If you'd like to wrap up, if there's anything I didn't ask you that you think is really important that you want to let the audience know about, an area that we didn't include in our discussion, this is now your opportunity to just tell everyone what you think is really important, and of course, let everyone know how they can support you, get in touch with you, and make sure that your work continues through the McCullough Foundation. That would be great.
Yes, there's one big breaking story that actually came out, I believe, yesterday. Senator Ron Johnson's office just sent out a press release, and they actually identified that the Biden administration was intentionally hiding and changing words of stroke risks after the COVID shot. So they were aware of a
Wow.
significant stroke safety signal from the shots, and they did not alert anybody. They didn't alert the public. They kept it buried.
Wow.
So that's, very, very criminal, right? How many people got these shots when they had these safety signals? We also know they hid the myocarditis signals. That already came out in a Senate
Right.
hearing, but now they hid the stroke signals too. So,
Wow.
something needs to be done. There needs to be accountability. And yeah, you can follow me on X at NIC Hulscher, and Substack, thefocalpoints.com, and also Instagram and Facebook. You can find me there as well.
All right. And tell Dr. Peter McCullough I said hi.
Definitely.
He's going to be
Definitely.
in a couple weeks. You're doing such great work. And I'm just so glad that you're working with him. Really an amazing collaboration. And I'm a huge fan. So keep up that great work, and I'll have you in as much as we can, so that we can continue to bring people the good news, right? The bad news about what was done to us, but the good news regarding how we are fighting back and we are helping each other to heal from what was done to us. You are right at the center point of that, and I want to thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'd love to be back.
Okay, amazing, amazing. All right, guys, Nicholas Hulscher, he's going to be a regular on the SJ show. I'm just telling you right now. Um, I hope I don't bother him too much, but I just amazing, amazing work that he is doing. I'm not surprised that he is working with and under the guidance of Dr. Peter McCullough. Not surprised in the least. In fact, Dr. Peter McCullough will be with us. I just booked him this morning. I want to say 2 weeks from now, if I'm not mistaken. We're going to have so much to talk about. So we are going to welcome Dr. Peter McCullough into the Joy Virtual Studio in just a couple weeks. Such great information. The Focal Points is the website, and he's on, Nicholas is obviously on Substack and Twitter, which is where he does most of his work. And yeah, he's just great. A fantastic young man. I agree with you, CJP Rumble. Can you believe that he just graduated from not undergrad, but his post grad 2 years ago? 2 years ago. So it just gives me so much hope, so much hope. So we're going to go to a quick break. When we come back, we're going to go right into a pre-recorded interview that I did with a very, very special guest. His name is Dr. Alejandro Diaz, and he is with the Wellness Company. He is talking about tuberculosis. So once again, what is the theme here? They poisoned Americans through the rollout of the COVID shots and Operation Warp Speed in a million different ways. But one of the most basic ways was the suppression of the human immune system in a variety of ways. We'll talk with Nicholas about that on another show, I'm sure. Now, that suppression of our immune systems is contributing to the rise in infectious diseases, and horrifyingly, tuberculosis is one of them. We're going to talk about tuberculosis outbreaks here in the U.S., and we're seeing them across the globe. And the way that Dr. Diaz describes this, if you were to compare, say, tuberculosis with the flu, it's like the flu is a poodle and tuberculosis is like a rabid Rottweiler. Like, it's a horrifying disease, and people need to understand it, not so that you're afraid, but so that you can protect yourself and your kids. And so we're going to be talking about that in that very special sequence that we're going to run after the break. Again, our sponsors at the Wellness Company, helping us understand what the threats are out there, but then also providing so many ways for people to heal. So we're very thankful for the folks over at the Wellness Company for sponsoring this. And we're going to go to that interview. And then I will come back after the interview. We will close up the show right after. So I will be back with you guys in just about a little less than a half an hour. But without further ado, we're going to go to break, and then we'll go right into that interview. Hey everyone, I am so proud to recommend Schiff Gold to this audience as the gold standard for metals purchasing and investing. I couldn't ask for a better partner to help people understand gold and silver and use them as strategic instruments to protect their family's financial future. Peter Schiff's teaching on markets has shaped my understanding of how economies grow and why they collapse. And I've used him as a critical source for my daily broadcast for over 10 years. The Shannon Joy Show audience already knows and loves Peter because he has been such a treasured educator over the years. He is now the preeminent source for rock-solid financial analysis around the world. And this is because he understands the immutable laws of natural markets and his stalwart unwillingness to veer from absolute truths regardless of economic fads and political pressures. Bottom line, he doesn't sell out. And that means a lot to me. I trust Schiff Gold, and you can too. Go to schiffgold.com/joy today to get started. You'll find some of the lowest spot prices for gold and silver and critical information on protecting your retirement savings with a gold or silver IRA. That's www.schiffgold.com/joy. Hedge against the chaos with our friends over at Schiff Gold. At 123.com/joy. Everything that you're going to need for preparation: generators, solar panels, Faraday products. If you want to disappear and protect yourself from the surveillance state, they have an entire line of amazing Faraday products called dark bags. They're always 10% off at the satellite phone store if you go to sat123.com/joy. That is sat123.com/joy. The satellite phone store has supported the Shannon Joy Show for many years. They are amazing partners, and let's help the companies that help keep the lights on here at the Shannon Joy Show. So if you are in the market for any of their products or services, make sure you use that promo code JOY and go to sat123.com/joy. That's sat123.com/joy. Welcome back, everyone, to the Shannon Joy Show. And today we have a very special guest for the very first time in the Joy Virtual Studio, Dr. Alejandro Diaz. He is the Chief Pediatric Officer, or the Chief of Pediatric Medicine over at the Wellness Company, amazing sponsor of the Shannon Joy Show. His Substack is DiazMD at substack.com, entitled Biopolitics. And we're going to talk to Dr. Diaz today about infectious disease, about tuberculosis in particular, one of those very scary terms, very scary diseases that we thought had been eradicated years and years ago. Well, unmitigated immigration and mass migration into the interior of the United States of America over the past 10 years has now upped the resurgence of tuberculosis among children and others, and it's something that we need to pay attention to. Dr. Diaz, thank you so much for being with us today, and welcome. This is the first time you've been on the show. I'm really glad to have you. How are you doing today?
Shannon, thank you so much for having me on your show.
Of course, of course. Well, let's talk first about just, your history is the first time the audience has met you. Obviously, you're working with an amazing organization, the Wellness Company. So many of those docs have been regulars on the Shannon Joy Show. Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Drew Pinsky, very dear friends of this show and the audience. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the work that you're doing today? And then we'll get into health and wellness, right? Talking about tuberculosis, but then also talking about how we can protect ourselves and make sure that our immune systems are healthy, our children's immune systems are healthy and functioning, and give people a lot of great information that they can use to protect themselves and their families. But, first, a little bit about yourself. I'd love to learn more about you and your history.
Sure. Thank you so much. So I'm Dr. Alejandro Diaz. I was born and raised in Mexico, but I've been traveling all over the world,
Okay.
practicing medicine, training in medicine, different fields. So first I'm an MD, and then I did pediatrics, and then allergy, immunology, and then overseas in Belgium, pediatric gastroenterology. And then I work in immigration medicine for so many years,
Mm.
traveling virtually all over the world, understanding migration medicine. And I used to work in one of the largest and busiest centers in the world when it comes to, screening migrants.
Mm.
So I do a lot of global health. One of my, well, and most and foremost, I'm married. I'm
Aw.
Christian. I have four beautiful boys,
Wow.
and I just love to help people.
Mm.
I just love to help people. Yes.
Well,
I'm sorry, my claim to fame is that I predicted the pandemic that I call the COVID operation a year
mm,
before in national radio. And so
wow.
that's pretty much me.
Yeah, so you knew that this was coming, and we know that the fear and the propaganda around, deadly infectious diseases, I mean, it's rampant. And people can get quite frightened. Was way overblown during COVID. It was manipulated. And obviously, we know, I mean, it led to lockdowns and forced masking and the rollout of the deadly shots as a mitigation effort. And we want to avoid that, right? We want to avoid the fear. We want to avoid the panic around infectious diseases. And we want to have a healthy population so that the government can never lock us down again or use a pandemic or the fear of a pandemic to lock us down. This is why keeping an eye on our health, making sure these immune systems are super healthy and functioning is so incredibly important. Doesn't mean that there aren't infectious diseases out there that can cause some harm. And today we want to talk about tuberculosis with Dr. Diaz because no one else is talking about it. And as I mentioned, it is resurging in the US because of immigration, and it's largely unreported. What have you found? In the Substack, The Quiet Resurgence of Tuberculosis is the title of a piece that you just recently wrote, and we have linked that into the show notes of the Shannon Joy Show if you would all like to take a look. But you say unprecedented migration flows are shaping the epidemiology of tuberculosis and emerging diseases, and you go into a detailed report on this. What have you found, and why should people be concerned?
Yeah, so first of all, Shannon, one of the things that I would like to share with your audience is that if you ask virtually any doctor in the United States specifically, and you ask them about tuberculosis, chances are they will say, we don't know anything about it.
Wow.
Different reasons, not because they're careless, it's because the medical system, they have been put tuberculosis as a relic,
Mm,
something in the past, something that it's already in control, and it is not.
okay.
That's the inconvenient truth. So let me tell you about what is tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is a highly contagious disease that it's caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which is an intracellular microorganism that has a thick, lipid-rich cell wall.
Okay.
And it's most of the time, virtually all the time, it's transmitted through respiratory droplets,
Okay.
respiratory microparticula.
Okay.
And it's highly contagious. It's been in humanity for thousands of years, probably in medical history books, up to 9,000 years. And it's, widespread all over the world, specifically in Southeast Asia, some places in Africa, Latin America, and even in the United States. So that's the description of tuberculosis. The signs and symptoms of tuberculosis are very unique, and those are chronic cough for over 3 weeks, fever, night sweats, malaise. The patient doesn't feel well, they lose weight, they don't have appetite, and they look bad. But that's like in the late stages of the disease.
Okay.
When it becomes tricky is that since doctors, they don't have it under the radar, they will never suspect tuberculosis. But if we think about it, those are pretty much exactly the same signs and symptoms of COVID.
Interesting.
Yeah. So what happened during COVID, Shannon? What happened during COVID? It was mass formation psychosis for 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Every single patient that comes into the ER, that comes into the office visit, or so on and so forth, everything was labeled as COVID, not even influenza.
Right.
Can you imagine how many cases of undetected tuberculosis were on those ERs, on those hospital rooms and office visits? Because everything was labeled COVID.
Right. That's right.
ER.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's when it gets very tricky.
Are there efforts to inform doctors or screen for tuberculosis in the US today? I mean, you mentioned in your piece here that we are seeing increasing numbers of cases of tuberculosis in the US. Can you talk about migration, immigration, and what we're seeing on the interior, and how we can get a handle on that and understand how to diagnose it, and then of course how to treat, and even more importantly, how to prevent it, right? Like at the end of the day, we want to make sure that there are preventative measures out there. But what are you seeing here in the US that alarms you?
Very important question. So I would like to divide this in 4 main pillars.
Okay.
Public health disruption, and we will go through it. Migration overcrowding, drug resistance, and immune suppression. What I mean by public health disruption, it's exactly what happened during the hysteria and the mass formation during the COVID operation. What happened? Everything was labeled COVID. Everybody who was coughing and had fever and feel ill and so on and so forth, it was labeled as COVID. So what happened was the major programs for tuberculosis detection and treatment, they were shut down.
Wow. Okay.
So can you imagine the delay and the backlog of early diagnosis for tuberculosis in the United States? And then what happened in the last 5 years? Obviously, that stopped when President Trump started into the administration. But before that, there are estimations that 11 million people cross unauthorized the southern border.
Oh,
Many
wow.
of them coming from high burden tuberculosis countries, and the vast majority of them, they weren't screened for tuberculosis. Can you imagine that? So we have that, and then drug resistance. We have been seeing worldwide an increase of drug resistance for tuberculosis. That's an additional component. And an additional component, which is the 4th pillar of it, it's immune suppression. What is immune suppression? A weakening of the immune system. What happened after what they call vaccines. I never call them vaccines. I'm an immunologist, vaccinologist. I call them toxic injectable products of
Right.
experimentation, the so-called vaccines.
Right.
So we have an immense amount of people who took those jabs worldwide. But let's talk about the United States and their immune system. It's weakened.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Weakened.
Yeah.
If we take into account that we have in the United States, this is public health, pure public health. We have in the United States approximately 40 million patients with diabetes. Diabetes, by definition, it's an immunological disease that their immune system is weakened.
Mm.
So if we put all these four main pillars into account and what's going on right now in the United States, we have the perfect storm to start seeing an increase in diagnosis of tuberculosis. The challenge here is that not many doctors, they don't know how to screen for tuberculosis because they haven't seen probably not even one single case. They can remember their subjects and their microbiology and pathology during medical school, but that was many years ago. They
Right.
haven't seen an actual case of tuberculosis. So patients, and that is when it gets tricky. So we have to empower our public health system.
Well, and people have to be asking their doctors about this and understanding what it is. What makes tuberculosis different than, a cold, a flu, some of the other diseases that we see out there? Is it deadlier? Is it impacting different age groups? Is it more dangerous for certain age groups? I mean, what is your concern about the lack of understanding or knowledge about an increasing occurrence of tuberculosis in the country? How would that manifest in terms of the population and the potential for real harm to their bodies?
That's a great question, Shannon. And let me put it this way. What concerns me about tuberculosis, and let's make a historic perspective. Up until this day, tuberculosis is still the number one killer when it comes for infectious diseases.
Really?
It has been the number one killer of communicable diseases since the history of mankind.
Even today?
Even today, worldwide. If we talk about worldwide, it's highly contagious.
Mm.
If it's not treated, patients can die. Right now, estimates that approximately 13 million Americans, these are CDC data,
Okay.
13 million Americans right now have LTBI, which what is LTBI? Latent tuberculosis infection. That means that the microbacterium, it's already there in their lungs, just waiting for something, a dent in the immune suppression in the immune system to pick it up and start the disease.
Okay.
That size of the problem is the one that we have, but we need, capable physicians to do the right diagnosis and to think about tuberculosis. If you don't think about something, chances are you will not find it.
So one of the telltale signs of tuberculosis is a chronic, consistent cough over multiple weeks. That's how it gets started. You mentioned malaise and a fever. And so what would you say at this point? Let's move into what people can do to protect themselves and to protect their immune systems. And God forbid they do have tuberculosis. How do you go about getting screened for it or getting that diagnosis? I mean, what would you recommend to people watching today about how to know if they have it, and then how to treat it effectively and with impact? And then from there, we'll move on to preventative. So you are focusing on damaged immune systems because of the rollout of the COVID shots. And so people are still dealing with mRNA, the spike protein, all of the damage that has been done to their immune systems. This now is going to make them more vulnerable to everything. I mean, cancers, strokes, heart attacks, but also things like tuberculosis. And as you mentioned, tuberculosis is a Rottweiler with rabies compared to something like the flu. Okay, so we have to take it seriously. And so, diagnosis and treatment, what should people be on the lookout for? Should they notice these symptoms, and what should they be saying to their doctors if they experience them?
Well, the thing is that if you have a patient, if you're a doctor or you're a patient, and you're experiencing this constellation of signs and symptoms like fever, chronic cough more than 3 weeks, malaise, you
Mhm.
don't feel well, you don't have appetite, you're losing weight, and you're having night sweats, definitely you have to go and see the doctor. If you're traveling abroad, if you're going to different high burden countries for business or pleasure or whatever, those are contributing factors that we have to take into account. But most specifically, doctors, they have to be aware that this tendencies of everything that it's happening right now, and just look at the main major airports in the United States right now, with the TSA staff
Oh,
problems and so on and so forth. We have 4 to 5 hours. I mean, that's overcrowding places. People
yeah,
will be coughing, will be talking, will be spending a extended amount of time. So it's just contributing factors that
right.
they're just aligning for that tuberculosis mycobacteria to rise in our public health community. So it's just a matter of not to create fear on anybody, just to create awareness that we
Sure.
having this. And I am predicted that if we don't do something about it, we will start to see a rise not only in tuberculosis but other communicable diseases because the weakening of the immune system.
Mm. So, what would you say in terms of prevention? We still need to fly. We still need to engage in society. We still need to gather in groups. We know that isolation, lockdown, shutdowns, masking, forced jabbing, none of that works. None of that will help to tamp this down. The best thing that people can do, in my opinion, is to number one, not be afraid, but number two, engage in preventative measures and making sure that their immune systems are healthy and working. I mean, from my perspective, I'll never get another shot ever in my life. That is the number one thing I think I can do to protect my immune system and the immune systems of my children. Lots of sunlight, lots of fresh air, feet in the ground, a good night's sleep every night. Like those are the baselines. But there are probably supplements that people can take too. I'm not sure if there are certain things that they've crafted at Wellness Company that can help people with immune support and making sure, especially people who may have taken the shot or who may have taken multiple shots. So, in terms of prevention, in addition to those things, what kind of products and supplements are out there that people can maybe think about to help them get started on repairing and really helping their immune system get ready to battle anything that is thrown their way, whether it's tuberculosis or the flu or the common cold or pneumonia, you name it. What would you recommend?
Well, basically, Shannon, you mentioned them all of the above.
Okay.
So that's exactly the right thing to do. Do your grounding,
Yeah.
quality of sleep, good hydration, your
Mm,
supplementation from zinc to vitamin C, vitamin D, take your supplements,
yeah.
positive thinking, positive thoughts. Do,
Right.
do not be afraid because that thing was unfortunately one of the fear was more deadliest than the virus itself during COVID. And I
Wow.
told that vividly all over the places where I was speaking that we do not have to be afraid. So that's a very good, that is very good. And, try to stay as healthy as you can. And we will be able to feel better.
Right. Well, so the spike support helps to break down, right? People who are COVID vaccine spike injured. That's one of the wellness products. It's Peter McCullough's product that I think is really important to consider if you have taken COVID shots or if your loved one has taken COVID shots. I think that's the baseline to begin to clear the body of, people who have taken the shots. And then, yeah, I am, vitamin D is one. I live in New York State. We have a lot of cloud cover. Right now, we are in the March doldrums. And when I tell you the sun has not peeked out in like 10 days, and I looked at the forecast for next week, and we have another 10 days of zero sun, zero sun. So if you live in the Northeast, vitamin D is one of my absolute staples. And Wellness Company has great formulations for vitamin D and for zinc. By the way, guys, always use the promo code JOY. So Wellness Company is a sponsor of the SJ Show. My link is twc.health/joy. That's twc.health/joy. And they have all kinds of discounts for Joy watchers and listeners. And so always use the promo code JOY. They have all sorts of formulations at Wellness Company that you guys can take a look at for your D, for your zinc, spike support, that type of thing. What are your favorites? What do you think is like if people are going to look at a supplement, what do you think is like the baseline? I mean, for me, D has been really important, but are there any other formulations that you think are just the most important in terms of getting started? Because there are lots of supplements out there, a million different things that people can take. And sometimes it's confusing to people.
That is true. Talking from the wellness company perspective, definitely my favorite because of obvious circumstances, what happened with the COVID operation and the toxic injectable products and the spike protein, so on and so forth. It's
Mm,
the Ultimate Spike Detox. That's
yeah,
an amazing product, all natural, a lot of research behind it, formulated by the great Dr. Peter McCullough,
love
uh,
him. Love
published
him.
authors in history,
Yeah,
and it's just an amazing, other amazing product. It's component by Dr. Victory is Shield. So
okay.
we have a lot of different products that people can try, and but bottom line, it's we need more healthy people. We
Mm.
need to have positive thinking. We have to eat right, to sleep better, to get sunlight, to do grounding, to just create a healthier community. That's exactly what we need.
Absolutely. What is the mechanism of for the ultimate spike detox in terms of like the ingredients? Do you have an understanding of how that works within the body to break apart the spike and kind of cleanse the body from that poisoning? And how long does it take? I know, I think I've seen in some cases you need to be on it for somewhat of an extended period of time, depending on how many shots that you got. But can you talk about how that works and the science behind it? Because I think it's very interesting, and I know a lot of people love that product, but I'd love to hear more about that and how it works in those who had the COVID shots.
First of all, these are 100% natural products.
Okay.
There's no chemicals, there are no alkaline, there's no drugs, it's 100%. They
Okay.
have been they have been in nature for thousands of years. We're
Right.
talking about bromelain,
Mm-hmm.
dandelion, we're talking about black pepper,
Yeah.
uh, grapefruit and uh, so many other nattokinase. I mean,
Yeah.
nattokinase have
Yeah.
been for thousands of years in Japan, and people have taken it, and it just helped to break down that spike protein that creates this inflammation that
Hmm.
it's hosted in the ACE receptors, and it's just created clotting problems, myocarditis, pericarditis, circulatory problems.
Yeah.
Even we're starting to see a rise in cancers like never before. We're starting to see what we call the turbo cancers, not only in the general population, but in very young patients. We're starting to see that we haven't seen any. I've been a doctor for 35 years, and I haven't seen anything like this. I talk to doctors all over the world on a weekly basis, and they're surprised that they're starting to see all this insanity in the rise in turbo cancers and many other
It's
problems.
horrifying, the
It is.
turbo cancers.
It is.
Um, every single day I hear of a new friend or family member or colleague who has come down with a turbo cancer. And even in the what is quite distressing is that this is happening even in the unvaccinated communities, people who haven't taken the shots, which really does lend a little bit of credibility to some of the studies that we've seen regarding shedding. And so now more than ever, my audience knows that I am very focused on immune health and protecting not only my immune system but my family's as well. And that a lot of that has to do with getting the right mix of supplements. So I'm really thankful for all the work that you have done, and all the work that they've done over at the Wellness Company in terms of the research and the development of really great products that inspire and help people protect themselves, right? So that they don't have to be afraid of the next lurking disease around the corner that's going to jump out and get them. They can know that their bodies are healthy and that their immune systems are ready to take on whatever comes their way. So it's great to meet you, Dr. Diaz. And everyone, his Substack is diazmd@substack.com. It's entitled Biopolitics, and you can check out his piece, The Quiet Resurgence of Tuberculosis. We need to take this seriously. This is a serious disease, and I'm glad that we were able to learn a little bit more about it, signs and symptoms. And anything else that you think that the audience needs to know about tuberculosis and how to protect themselves as a takeaway from our discussion before I let you go? We have about 5 minutes left. So anything else that you think is super important?
Well, things and times are very different than before. And my main concern right now, worldwide, I travel all the time, all over the world, giving conferences and so on and so forth. And this is one of the main things that I speak about, biopolitics, and I speak in different parliaments and so on and so forth, is that we never had anything like this COVID operation before. Never.
Right.
Never in the history of mankind. Never.
Right.
And unfortunately, we have the toxic injectable products in many people. 5.5 billion people took those jabs, at least one dose. And it's a scientific fact that their immune system has been going through a severe depression.
Right.
And unfortunately, we're going to start seeing this tremendous amount of different rise in communicable diseases, from measles to tuberculosis to monkeypox to any other communicable diseases and things along that line, and turbo cancers and things like that. So we just have to be in the best shapes of our lives.
Absolutely. Because they'd love to use an outbreak of tuberculosis to lock us down. They'd love to use an outbreak of measles to lock us down. And we just can't give that to them. That's why, to your point, we've got to protect our bodies and our immune systems. I absolutely agree that things are going to get pretty dicey. I forgot to mention this. This changed my life. Dr. Peter McCullough, speaking of Dr. Peter McCullough, who we need to have on the show again, by the way, soon. Years ago, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I had him on the show, and we're talking about all of these things. And he mentioned to me a little homemade solution that he created. He didn't create it, but he used, and he shared the recipe. It's a betadine, 1 part betadine to 10 parts of distilled water, right? So a little solution, and you would put it in like one of those little nasal sprays. And anytime he was in a big crowd, he was traveling internationally, he's at the airport for 5 hours, standing in a line, like swollen glands, any hint of something happening, right? He would take a few squirts of the betadine in the water potion in the nostrils, either both nostrils, a couple times a day for a few days. And I took his advice. I made my own solution, and I will tell you, knocks everything out, everything. And now my entire family, they're like, Mom, you're crazy. Mom, you're crazy. Mom, you're crazy. My husband, you're crazy. Now they know I never get sick, ever, ever. I mean, I take my supplements. I make sure I have my, my D and my zinc every day. And they see that I never get sick. And so now they're all obsessed with it. Even my college age son has turned on all of his roommates and his teammates on his volleyball team to it when they need to perform and they can't miss a game or a practice. Like they just knock it right out. Your thoughts on that? Because that's been a game changer for me. I mean, it's crazy, but is your thoughts on that? Because it's so easy, but it works.
I've been a fan of Dr. Peter McCall since the beginning of the COVID operation.
Right.
We became friends, and I admire him so much, his work and everything. And I agree 100%. Those iodine povidone solutions that we also have, among other ingredients, natural ingredients of the wellness company.
Oh, you do? You have like a
oh yeah, and they work incredible. All
So
my family, all my kids, my wife, myself included, we use it all the time, and we're very healthy. Thank God.
Okay. I didn't know that wellness company had, oh geez. All right. Get it. I mean, the best. I mean, I make my own like little solution, and it's probably not nearly as potent and effective as something that they make at wellness companies. So that's great. If you don't want to make your own, just go to my website and grab it from the wellness company. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to get to know you, and I really appreciate all of your work. And we'll hope to have you on the show again to talk about other aspects of health. But great job. And guys, make sure you follow him on his Substack, DiazMD at substack.com. Also support the Wellness Company. They are amazing sponsors of the Shannon Joy Show, twc.health/joy. That's twc.health/joy. Everything there discounted when you use the promo code JOY. So thank you so much, my friend. Really appreciate you.
Thank you, Shannon. Thanks so
Okay,
much.
keep up the great work.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back in a moment right here on the SJ Show. And today I want to talk to you guys about ivermectin. I'm using their ivermectin cream right now, and it has been a lifesaver for rosacea. I haven't been dealing with acne or anything like that recently, but as I've aged, my skin has gotten bumpy and red sometimes, itchy, and I've been dealing with rosacea. The ivermectin cream from TWC is absolutely knocking it out. In fact, it started working within a day or two of using it, and I have not had any problems since. If you think you're dealing with bad skin as an adult and acne, you might be dealing with something else, an untreated root cause. And it starts small. If you're like me, it's a little redness, a few bumps, and then it expands, and then it becomes consistent and persistent. You go through the cycle of doctor appointments trying to figure out what's going on, one product after another, and you're not alone. So 25% of adults struggle with acne, and more than 14 million Americans battle rosacea. 1 in 10 people suffer from chronic dermatitis or eczema. So these are not just cosmetic issues. They itch, they burn, and they crush confidence. And I have been dealing with this for many years. I can't believe how well the ivermectin cream works. It's called Clear Skin Ivermectin Cream from the Wellness Company. It's a dermatologist designed prescription formula that targets the root cause safely, gently, and under the skin. So it helps to clear your clogged pores and brighten the skin. It reduces inflammation, and it helps control bacterial overgrowth to calm in irritation. It's amazing. I love this product. You can have it too. go to twc.health/joy. That's twc.health/joy. Use the promo code JOY. You'll save $20 off plus free shipping in your first for your first order. So that's twc.health/joy, twc.health/joy. And let me tell you, it doesn't help. It doesn't help to have to be on the video every single day. You know, I used to be a podcaster, and that was great. I could come in my pajamas with my hair everywhere, don't have to do hair and makeup. It was just audio, radio, and podcast. And ever since platforming out to all of these video platforms, it matters a little bit more. And you want to have that confidence. I want to have that confidence. So I'm super thankful to the folks over at TWC. The ivermectin cream is an absolute miracle worker. So thank you, thank you, thank you to the Wellness Company and all of our sponsors here on the Shannon Joy Show. Welcome back, everyone, to the final segment of the SJ Show. I hope that you learned a lot from Dr. Alejandro Diaz. He is such a great guy. Sorry, my phone's ringing. It's Naomi Wolf. Love that girl so much. I'm gonna silence it for now, and I'll call her right back because I'm live on air. But I hope you guys enjoyed that interview with Nick Hulscher. I promise you, we're going to bring Nicholas back on the SJ Show. I see all of you on the live chat. It was blowing up. He is extraordinary. And his understanding of from the 40,000 foot vantage point of what is happening in context of medical freedom. So whether it's political, legislative, whether it's the lawsuits and the cases or the research, he is in understanding of all of it, and it makes him a really, really important person. So we are definitely going to have him on again. So yeah, I hope you guys had enjoyed the show today. And I have to wrap it up because we're already at an hour and 45 minutes. The show is only supposed to be 90 minutes long, an hour and 30 minutes, and we went over today. So you got a little extra from the Shannon Joy Show. But tomorrow, it's going to be fantastic, luxurious. I have no guest. It's just going to be you and me. We're going to go over the news of the day and other larger themes that I kind of want to talk to you about. So big show tomorrow. Make sure you guys are giving us thumbs up if you're watching on Substack. So thankful for all of you Substackers. Please consider signing up and becoming a subscriber of the SJ Show on Substack. And if you like everything that we do, please consider becoming a paid subscriber as well, because it helps to keep the show independent. For those of you on the live chat on Rumble, you guys are fantastic. Great to see you. And yeah, Friday, do not miss the show. Peter Schiff will be with us live for at least an hour. And we're going to be talking about the pump and dump Trump, the insider trading, all of the manipulation of the markets, the manipulation of gold and silver markets, what's happening in the Shanghai exchange versus the COMEX exchange. There is so much going on, and we need to understand what is happening with our finances because the S is going to hit the fan. So big, 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 big show with Peter Schiff on Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern time to 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. I will be self-producing, so we won't have all the fancy graphics, and we won't have Annie, who is amazing, who produces the show, but I think I can figure it out. So Friday is not behind a paywall. Mark the Regan. I would never put Peter Schiff behind the paywall. Ever, 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 ever. So yeah, he's great. And tomorrow, I'm going to overview a phenomenal interview that I posted on my show notes yesterday about what's going on in the gold and silver markets from a Canadian. And he's a Canadian who is very well versed in mining, the actual physical extraction of metals, primarily gold, from the earth, and the building of mines and the building of mining companies. And I know that Peter is really, really interested in mining stocks. In fact, I just called Don Polano, my financial advisor over at PCM and Associates, and I said, let's have a conversation today about mining stocks because I'm very interested in that. I think that gold and silver, I mean, long term. So 5, 10, 15, 20 years is going to be very, very important. And so, yes, I would never, ever, Mark the Regan, put Peter behind a paywall. Nobody puts Peter in a corner. Anyway, Ralph the Flying Dutchman. Annie is amazing. Yes, she is. Thank you, Ralph, for being with us today. Right, exactly. Guitar Lily, great to see you. Clones, great to see you. Chronozone 777, glad that you were with us today on the Rumble live chat. You guys are amazing. We'll be back again tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll be here again, 12 p.m. Eastern time for another show. And I can't wait to meet up with you guys again. So have a great afternoon. We'll be back tomorrow to do it all again right here on the Shannon Joy Show.